Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to our webinar this afternoon, Organizational Architecture Structure. This is a series, so if you missed our previous sessions, you can go into our on-demand on our website to view the previous sessions. Christy Weyerbach is your presenter today, and she is our Managing Director of our Workforce Advisory Services here at Stanbaugh+Ness. A few housekeeping items before I turn it over to Christy today. You can customize what you're seeing on the screen by going to the GoToWebinar screen viewer. We have a few different audio options here this afternoon. We have computer and the dial-in option. If one is not working, try toggling to the other, and if not, send us a chat and we will hopefully get you figured out there. We do have the questions panel open for questions today, so if you do have any questions for Christy, please insert them in there and we will do our best to get to those questions either during the presentation or directly after. If your question goes unanswered, we will have Christy reach out to you via email after the webinar. We will have 3 polling questions today as we are offering CPE credit. So if you are looking to gain that credit today, please make sure that you're answering all 3 of those as we need those in order to issue you that credit. You can download the handout that is being presented today in the handout section of the GoToWebinar panel. That is in PDF format. So if you have any issues downloading that, please ping us and we will get you figured out there. Speaking of CPE, please allow us a couple business days to get those out to you. We do work with a third-party vendor called SimpleCert to distribute those. So if you're not seeing those in your inbox within the week after the presentation, check your junk and spam. And if it's not in there, please feel free to give us a buzz about that. And for our survey, we will have a survey at the end of the presentation. Please let us know how we did, insert any questions that went unanswered, and that is where you will choose if you need the CPE credit this afternoon for this presentation. So without further ado, Christy, you can take it away.
Thank you so much. And hello, everyone. I want to first apologize for not visibly being in front of you. As many of you know, I do like to have my camera on and encourage anyone else to do the same. But for whatever reasons today, my network is just not working the way it normally does. Maybe it's the rainy weather we're having here in central Pennsylvania. So in order to make sure that we had the smoothest possible experience today, I am going to keep my video turned off, but just know I am here with you and look forward to spending the next hour with you. A little bit about myself. As Kaylee had mentioned, I lead our workforce advisory area here at Stanbaugh+Ness, and I'm very passionate about this because for many years, organizations did not focus on the people. Rather, they focused on operations, putting their head down into the project or things that they were working on, and far too frequently, or infrequently, I should say, there wasn't a voice at the executive table representing the people. And so over the past couple years, I've seen some really exciting things happen where people are being considered at the executive table. And it's a lot of times now one of the first things that organizations are talking about, whether we can find the right talent, retain the right talent, and or make sure that our culture is in a great place in order to keep our talent. And so as we continue to move forward, this is just going to continue to grow in importance. And I'm very excited because this has been a wonderful journey. And I appreciate all of you connecting today because you are interested in the future of your organization and how structure might be a piece of that. And so if there's ever a time that you want to pick my brain on some of the trends that I'm seeing from attracting of talent, retaining of talent, and so forth, please feel free to reach out. It's one of the things that I get excited about talking about and so forth. And there's sometimes some things that we don't like to talk about as well, performance issues and so forth, but that's par for the course. So I am excited to kick off our last session here in our series. So a little bit about the organizational architecture. I truly believe that if we are able to put things together in a unique way, it allows us to have an advantage out in the marketplace, an advantage with finding people, keeping people, and so forth. And so we could have a whole conversation on that alone. But what we're going to focus on today is looking at your organization, thinking forward, what type of structure do you need in place going forward? How do you identify the appropriate functions that are needed within your organization for the core services that you have of your business? And then also to ensure that the appropriate flow of work is in place to be able to minimize redundancy and gaps and so forth. But before we get started, I do want to ask you to complete this poll question here. Kaylee's going to go ahead and bring it up for us because I am interested to know, what is your biggest worry with structure? Is it that your board of directors may lean in too much or not enough? Do they maybe go through a transition here in the next couple of years as people are stepping on or stepping off? Do you anticipate outgrowing your current structure? Maybe you're seeing a lot of success winning projects or selling a lot more of your products and so forth. So, what does that look like going forward as you continue to grow as an organization, both from a revenue standpoint and from an employee count standpoint? Is it because maybe you just haven't had the type of structure that you've needed? Maybe you started out with only a couple employees and now you continue to grow and you've always just done what you've always done. And now you recognize, hey, I think we need to put a little bit more of a guide rail on this thing that we call our business. And then maybe you are worried just about succession planning and the impact of some significant contributors stepping away in the very near future. And so I am interested because maybe one or more of these apply, but what is your biggest worry at this moment? And I think we have probably a couple more seconds here before we'll close it down and share the results with you. And I'll talk through some of the answers here. So very interesting. All right, Kaylee, we want to go ahead and share those results. Okay, so you should see on your screen that we have 5% of people that are worried about the board of directors. We're going to talk about that a little bit, but I won't emphasize too much time on that. I see that a lot of people are outgrowing their current structure, and that's exciting because it sounds to me like your organization is in growth mode. And so that is a fun place to be. It can be chaotic and stressful, but definitely a fun place to be. Lack of structure, that's okay. That's why you're attending, and hopefully we can help give you some priority items to take back to your team to start thinking through and working on. And then succession planning. Absolutely one of the reasons that you might be looking at your structure now, as you have maybe former owners stepping away, new ownership coming in. You also just might have a change in the type of services or products that you offer. And with the baby boomers leaving in mass amounts every single day, it's no wonder that this would be something impacting your organization potentially. But depending on what you do today with your structure, you could set your organization up to help minimize some of those large impacts with the growth, with the succession planning and so forth. So let's go ahead and move forward here. Thank you very much, Kaylee. I appreciate your help there with that poll question. So if you've been following the series, you know that we've walked through each one of these gears. I will tell you that purpose is usually the fun one as we think about why do we want to do what we do. Strategy then allows us to get creative and think about the vision, and we know why we want to do something, but then how are we going to do it? Where are we going to go, and what does that look like? Who are we going to provide value to, and so forth. I got to admit that structure is the hardest one here. So we did talk about processes a couple weeks ago, and that has a lot of volume to it, but it doesn't have to be extremely difficult or challenging necessarily. And then culture, if we do all the other things right, we definitely are in a good place, hopefully, with encouraging the behaviors that we need to ensure that we're successful going forward. So structures where you're really going to have to roll up your sleeves. You're going to have to put some significant thought into this. And I'm not saying that any of you who responded to the poll question are in a place where you have to do something significant or drastic. But if you're finding that, hey, we really have a few things broken here or not clearly defined, it might make sense just to start with a clean sheet of paper, right? And just start brainstorming internally and collaborating with the team to really give thought to what is going to be needed going forward. And so all of these pulled together is the organizational architecture. And if we can pull this together in a unique way, then you definitely are going to have an advantage out there because you're going to be working more smoothly together. You're going to have a better handle on where you want to go and why do you want to go there, and what are the things that you need to put in place and the resources that will be required to get where you want to go. And so this just really excites me. I'm sure you can tell by my voice, and hopefully it excites you as well, because this definitely provides a great way for you to leverage your organization going forward. So let's spend a few moments here just looking at the future. Some of you are worried just about that succession planning. And as you think about the next generation of your organization, and I'm not just talking about people per se, although a lot of times when you say generation, people immediately connect those dots, but think about where your organization is going. Are you in the midst of incremental change or transformative change? Are you rethinking the services and the products that you're going to be offering in the future? And what does that mean for the talent that you're going to need to be able to fulfill that? Or if you have some people stepping away here in the near future because they're retiring, then you might be losing some significant knowledge and expertise that might impact one of the services or products that you're offering. And so those are things that you have to give thought to as you're thinking about the structure, not only today that may have worked so well or has kind of not been broken, but you were able to limp along with it, but more importantly, as you move forward, what is needed to be put into place. And we're going to talk about those key components as we move forward here. You also want to think about governance. So for any of you who have followed me along this journey, you know that one of the hard trends is related to regulation. And so that sometimes can put additional pressure on our organizations, and it's out of our control. But if we can anticipate maybe what that regulation might be, are there things that we have to internally do differently to make sure that we're governing the organization, protecting the interests of the shareholders and stakeholders, and hopefully minimizing the amount of risk that the organization is subject to? So cybersecurity is one of those topics that we can easily talk about, because the government absolutely is starting to increase the regulation surrounding the way in which people are using and exchanging information and the technology and the expectations or standards of what has to be in place with all of those systems coming together, right? And so if we can anticipate how is that going to impact our industry, our organization, what are the things that we can do now to be able to prepare and plan for what we expect might come down the road, or at least to stay ahead of that curve where some others only might find out about cybersecurity when they've been hacked, right? So that's an easy example. We certainly could walk through other ones. But as you continue down this list here, give thought to the role of technology internally. How are you going to leverage it to streamline processes, to maybe step ahead of your competition, etc.? And what is the training and development that's going to be required of the people currently in your organization? Also, those that you hire, you might be looking for different types of skill sets with their ability to utilize technology in the most efficient way. And how can they keep pace with the change of technology? Because we know that continues to always change, whether it's a different piece of hardware or the software, the apps, etc. But then also think of the external technology demands. So you might be playing in a space with your products or services where your clients are demanding that you use a certain type of technology to deliver that product or service. Or your clients are moving in a certain direction, and for you to be able to continue to support them, you have to also make that shift. But is that the best thing for your organization? Those are the types of conversations you have to decide. What was the best use of our time historically may not be the continued best use of our time or energy going forward. Those are hard conversations. Those are one of the reasons that I said this section is going to be difficult emotionally, and just thinking through potential different pathways and the impact it could have in a small or big way on your organization. And as a result, are you going to continue to offer the same services and products you always have? Are you considering new? creating a new arm of your organization where you're going to be entrepreneurial in a growth mode? Or are you going to just stay stable and continue to deliver high quality things and services and so forth? So nobody has the answer for you. This is definitely something you have to work through on your own, and you can't do it alone. So you definitely need your team to come together, because everybody brings different perspectives to the conversation, assuming they all have the best interest of the organization and the future success of the business going forward. So let's dig in a little bit here on structure itself. So what is the role of structure? Why is it important? And why is this shaped out into its own gear? Well, if we have the structure put together in the right way, it will optimize performance. It'll help with making sure the right people are making decisions, and that the right people are looking at the organizational risk, and that the operations are being managed and handled by the right team. And so we're not all bumping into each other, and we have blurred lines with the roles and expectations, but hopefully there's clarity as to who does what, who's responsible, accountable, and etc. And then the right structure will also help to maximize the value. Maximizing the value could be for your stakeholders or shareholders. That could also be maximizing the value for your clients, for your employees, for the community, whoever that is, the audience or audiences that you've identified that you want to provide a value to when you are establishing your purpose and you are thinking about the strategy. How can we make sure that we're able to deliver upon that? Structure oftentimes is confused with an organizational chart. So people will say, oh, hey, we have these different departments or areas of our organization. Here are the people that are in charge of it. Here are the individuals that work within that department or unit. And so that doesn't always accomplish what is needed, because sometimes it may not be organized in the most efficient or successful way. Structure really does look to define the functional areas without thinking about a person specifically or a role specifically. We talked about roles and procedures and processes and so forth in our process section, so I'd point you to go back to that after you work through the structure. So while some organizations will try to pick and choose which order in that they want to work through the organizational architecture, it really is best to go left to right. And you might have a lot of things in play already, but if you don't, it definitely is a good exercise to walk through and confirm some things, maybe reconsider other things. And definitely once you define the structure, that processes part will be easier to complete. It won't be as much of a burden or as challenging, although there will be a lot of volume within that section, but then inevitably that will lead to those behaviors that we desire to get the results that we're looking to achieve, and that is how your culture continues to sustain itself. Remember, it's not about pizza parties. So when we think about structure, we're going to first talk at the organizational level, then we're going to take a step down to the departmental level, and then I want to connect this all to the business life cycle of your organization. So at the organizational level, we have to give thoughts to the shareholders and stakeholders. Now that could be, if you're in a for-profit business, that might be the ownership group. If you're a non-profit, those are the stakeholders, those who have a vested interest in what your organization does, maybe your larger donors, strategic partners, etc. And then we want to give thought to governance. Whose responsibility is that? What is it? We talked a little bit on a couple of the other slides about what that is, but then what is the role of a board of directors and officers? So I've seen more than once organizations that struggle sometimes with those boundaries, and I don't want it to seem like it's a wall, because it certainly is not a wall by any means. But as you think about the role of a board of directors or officers, it's important that they don't lean in too far or lean out too far. And what is that healthy balance? And I can't say that it's the same for every organization, but if they're leaning in too far or leaning out too far, there might be something else at play. So we'd have to peel that onion back a little bit. I have a feeling it's related to performance in some way. So whether it's performance of a leadership team or performance of a key person or individuals or the performance of the organization as a whole. That's where I see those boundaries tend to become blurred. So let's talk about shareholders and stakeholders specifically, right? Do we truly know what they want? What is that return on investment, or what is the appreciation that they're expecting for helping or volunteering or leaning into the organization, right? And so what is that value? What do they believe is the value that the organization should be providing? Is that aligned to what we talked about in purpose and strategy? Pulling all these together and making sure they're aligned, it provides the transparency and the clarity that's needed further along once we get down to the expectations of our people and our employees and so forth. So that's where you need to start when you're thinking about your structure is, what value are we trying to provide? What is the return on investment that our shareholders and stakeholders are expecting? And or what's the desired impact on the community? And how are we going to position ourselves internally to be able to deliver on that? Because if we don't deliver on that, that's when we have those individuals questioning whether they want to stay committed to the organization. So are they going to sell their shares? Are they going to decide not to commit any of their resources or finances to the organization? And so that's why it could be very delicate to figure out what is it truly they want, even if it's different than what you think it is. So we've got to reconcile that, is figure out, is that aligned with what they expect and what we're able to currently deliver and what we want to deliver going forward? If you can't get the clarity there, then the rest of this conversation is not going to go smoothly for you, and the structure is just not going to be positioned the way that it needs to be. So when you think of governance, you can call it a governing body, really is the combination of your board of directors and the officers of the organization. And I'm not talking about your CFO, your COO, etc. I'm talking about the president, vice president, potentially if you have one, treasurer, secretary, etc. Sometimes those individuals are considered part of the board of directors, and maybe they're different. So that could vary based on how your organization is set up. But making sure that it is defined in the bylaws what that role and responsibility is for the governing body. And so ideally what they're tasked with, or should be tasked with, is how to prevent loss. So they're going to monitor, make sure that the reputation of the organization stays in a good place, that the people within the organization are helping to carry that forward and really build a strong brand. Making sure that we don't lose assets, right? So are we subject to potentially technology assets that could be corrupted, etc.? What about making sure that we're able to keep our people, that we don't have significant turnover? And I apologize, I have a duplication of words there. But then also making sure we don't lose interest of the shareholders, whether we're a private or public company. It's important that we have shareholders who are interested in continuing to invest in us or supporting the organization. The board of directors and officers also need to worry about the share price. Are we continuing to stay steady with our value or increasing our value, or is it declining, and why? Do we continue to have the same or an increasing amount of market share, or are we losing traction? And as you think about our impression out in the community, is there still the confidence in what we are able to accomplish and deliver? And so that's what the board of directors and officers should focus on, making sure that the organization is headed in the right place. And if not, then lean in and say, hey, how can we help? Or let's collaborate and figure out what we do to get this turned in a different direction. So collectively, this group of individuals, the governing body, does have ultimate power. So they can make decisions, they can vote on certain items, and that's all spelled out in your bylaws. But individually, their power is very limited. So they don't have the decision-making authority that somebody internally to the organization would have. However, they do have the influence potentially by coming together collectively or as a whole to say, hey, organization, hey, management team, this is the direction that we think you need to go. And so one of the main tasks also of a board of directors and the officers is to ensure the right person is leading the organization forward. So whether you call that CEO or internally you call that a president, because maybe you don't have a president in the board, you might have a chairman of the board, but essentially making sure that you have that right individual. Because if you don't, that can trickle into so many other ways in which the organization might not be successful. And we could talk about that all day. But here are some things that as you think about your current board of directors and officers, what are they doing? What are they not doing? And maybe this is an area that you could provide clarity so everybody knows those guide rails and are helping the organization in the best way possible. So now let's dig into the departmental level as we think about the management team and then some of the critical functions of the organization. And you'll recognize a slide or two from the last conversation we had when we walked through processes. So as we think about the management team, this is varied based upon the organization, but essentially they report back to the governing body, right? And it could be somebody with an executive title, it could be a director or manager within the organization, but essentially the CEO is the main person responsible for the operating activities at the organizational level, and they're in charge of hiring the right people. So making sure that they have the team in place that can help deliver on what the stakeholders and shareholders desire and what the organization has committed to delivering in the way of products and services. And so the CEO also might be responsible for hiring some of the other executives and managers within the organization. She might task somebody else, but at the end of the day, the governing body is going to look at the CEO to have the answers, to hold people accountable, and make sure that those who are responsible are being diligent with those responsibilities and hopefully executing in a smooth and possible way. So let's go ahead and tee up our second poll question here for you. As you know, we do 3 of them, so I have one at the end of the presentation as well, but Kaylee will get this up for you. I'm interested to know, when was the last time you evaluated your core services? Those that your team can do pretty much flawlessly or at a high quality level, and that you're confident that your clients continue to see you as one of the experts in providing that service or product. So have you evaluated them in the past year? Maybe it's been more than a year, or maybe you never took a second look. You defined them when the organization started, or just continued to do what our forefathers and foresisters, that's what you want to call it, established. Or are you in a period of potentially transformation? It goes back to that next generation. As we think forward and we think about, what does the organization look like in the future? This is an area that could change. And why is that? Well, maybe it's because of the people that we have in the organization currently versus what we might have going forward. It could be the technology that completely changes what you do and how you do it. It could be regulation that just becomes so restrictive. You can't continue to profitably produce a product or service. So as soon as we get just a little bit more participation here, we'll hang tight for a couple seconds. We'll share this out. And I'm excited by the results. I really am. All right, as you can see that many of you, a majority, have evaluated your core services, and that's good. For those that it's been more than a year, maybe you don't have to evaluate them, but in the future you might. Hopefully you learned something today, so you know when that pressure point is or when that right time would be to potentially evaluate what your organization does. And for those of you that have never done it, it's okay. We don't know your story. It could be that your organization just started 2 years ago. Or maybe you just have something great that doesn't have to be challenged or questioned. So yeah, I'm excited to see that. Hopefully all of you benefit from seeing those results as well. Let's spend a little bit of time here on our core services and functions. So this is where the hard conversation happens. I see it regularly where you have one group of individuals in the organization that are passionate about something, And then you have the other side of the organization that recognizes, hey, we continue to invest resources, tools, money, etc., and that service just is not able to get us to the place that we want to be from either a revenue standpoint or profitability, right? And so I have found sometimes it's a relationship or emotional connection where we just could not envision telling a certain client or group of clients that, hey, we're no longer going to provide this service, right? That's devastating. That's a hard conversation to have, and not one that many people would raise their hand to say, hey, I'll do that. But anyway, we have to give thought to what is going to help us be successful. And sometimes it is hard decisions, hard choices. As we think about the best use of our time versus good use of our time, I mean, everybody works hard every day. There's no questioning that. But are we working hard in the places that makes the most value, provides the most value back to our people, whether that is the stakeholders, shareholders, clients, employees, etc. And so the one thing that I want you to think about, we're going to dig into these deeper as we go on the next couple slides, but are you in the business of providing a commodity, a standard product or service, or something that's custom? And then as we think about all of that, there is a different type of knowledge that's required in each of these areas. And as we walk through this, this is where I really need you to give thought to the people that are currently in your organization and what happens if some of them step away. What will that do to shift potentially the balance of the types of products and services that you offer? You might within your organization offer one or multiple types of services and products. So you might have to sunset one or more of them, or you might have to really think hard about what that next investment is going to be as you think about potentially a change and who is there to be able to help deliver these types of services and functions. So when we think about a commodity, it really is explicit knowledge. We could, for the most part, put somebody in front of a computer or put them in front of a piece of equipment or put them in front of a procedure and have them perform it. And it wouldn't take a terrible amount of knowledge, experience, etc., to be able to perform that, right? So we talked about in processes in our last session, and we gave thought to procedures. Well, we defined procedures so somebody could pick up the piece of paper and be able to perform that task with very little supervision and or oversight. And so as you think about a commodity, think about producing pens. I have a fetish with pens, so that's the only reason I picked it here. But essentially, it doesn't take a lot of significant experience or knowledge to be able to do that at a high quantity or high volume. As you think about the service-based business, here was one that came to mind is think about the dental hygienist who comes in and cleans teeth all day long. You give that person the initial training up front. They went to school to learn the techniques. They have the tools right there available to them. The tools are the same. It doesn't matter which person they're working on. And they are able to clean the teeth of the person that's sitting in the chair, right? Pretty easily. So that, for the most part, is something where if you had a significant change in talent or person, it wouldn't be hard to put somebody else into that role and to be able to flawlessly or smoothly continue to provide that commodity. So from a structure standpoint, this one really isn't as of significant concern. However, depending on the type of demand that you have in your industry, maybe certain commodities will no longer be relevant and you'll have to think of different ones that would appeal to your client base and so forth. And so I also just listed there performing an objective test, something that has no decision making or critical thinking skills required to be able to perform it. Again, a basic procedure, and somebody could pick it up and pretty much do it with maybe a small amount of knowledge up front or maybe no knowledge at all. Let's talk about standard. This now requires a little bit more knowledge. This is implicit, and this is based upon experiences. So if you think about painting cars, right, to me, a red car is a red car. But if you talk to somebody who works on painting cars, they know that there's different codes and different shades. In very small ways, one little number could be a big difference when you're thinking about the shades of red of a car. And so that takes some experience to know what numbers and codes do I need to be able to match up the color of the car, right? Now, that training can be developed and it doesn't require potentially significant expertise, although maybe somebody would argue, but I would think that painting cars, as long as you have the right tools in front of you and the right catalog to be able to determine what the code is, you could follow a procedure and probably figure it out pretty easily, right? Other than if you have an older car and visually have to inspect it, maybe that's where the expertise comes in. Anyway, if we carry on my dentist example, filling a cavity is where the dentist actually comes in. Based on their experience, they know how to do it most efficiently. They probably know the art of doing a cavity so it doesn't break in the future, or know what products specifically are best, and so forth. But very similarly, if you're continuing to just draft documents for the same type of building, the same type of bridge, maybe have a few little tweaks here and there, that's where you could see that the experience is very helpful, but it's not like highly specialized expertise, which you'll see on the next slide, that would be required to perform that function or service. And then I was thinking about, let's throw in military as an example, right? Military equipment, yeah, you would want to have some experience when you're deciding what is the most appropriate equipment to send over to the desert versus here locally in the States in rural Virginia, right? So I'm sure there's different types of equipment that make better sense, and you would know that if you had experience in providing those to those certain demographic areas, or if you actually worked in the military yourself. So hopefully I didn't bore you with my examples. I try to keep them pretty basic so that way we all can connect with them. And then third is the custom core service or product that you might be offering. This is where one of your bigger challenges is going to be, because it's going to be dependent on one or more people. So if you have a service area that is highly dependent on the expertise of one of your leaders, and that leader steps away, who is going to step into their shoes, right? I don't know that you can replace that expertise. You could get something similar, but what is really important is thinking about the succession planning and how can that knowledge and expertise be transferred. Are we in a place that we can groom somebody to learn a lot of what that person holds, based on the collection of experiences that they've had over time? And so that implicit knowledge is really based upon their own learnings, their mistakes that they made, the expertise that they've developed over time, the experiences that they've had. And so this is where it's really hard to plug and play, if you will. And so when you are an organization that has commodities, that structure is pretty easy, and the movement of people through the organization would not have a significant impact on that structure, and you probably wouldn't have to revisit it frequently. Now, when we think about the standard, that could be impactful depending on the team of people that you have there now versus in the future. So that definitely could be a little bit of a worry for me if I were in your organizations. But this custom is definitely a high concern, especially if you play in this space where you're not worried about volume, but you are worried about quality, and you are providing something that's highly specialized. So think about dental surgery. I need to go see a specialist for just a little bit of receding of gum line, right? Well, that not every dentist would be able to do that. And so somebody who specializes on gums and the connection to the teeth and so forth, they're better positioned to provide that. But if that person decides to leave, retire, who's there to step in? I don't know. If they did a good job of mentoring somebody, then they're in an okay place. But if not, then we've got challenges. Very similarly with heart surgery, right? It's an art, and that's something that if we as an organization are continuing to provide, we have to make sure that if somebody leaves, that we aren't going to significantly impact our organization in a negative way because of their departure. What steps and what are the things that we can put in place to hopefully have somebody else to step in and have that team there to continue to carry us forward. And so engineering is another example where if you're just doing Chick-fil-A's day in and day out, right, they have a similar model depending if it's on the East Coast or the West Coast. But if you're doing something new and different and you are trying to solve a new challenge potentially, that's where you need that highly specialized expertise of an engineer who has done similar things or has the thinking skills to be able to do this task, to be able to accomplish what the client is looking to achieve, right? And then military equipment for a specialized mission. Again, just something I was thinking about is, how can I give a variety of examples? And what came to mind is I had watched Captain Phillip, the movie, this past weekend. And so that was a very specialized mission that they were on. And it required very specific equipment and materials and things like that. And one of the things that they had asked Captain Phillips to do is put on a shirt and to keep him warm, but really they had some other things connected to that shirt in a way that they could identify him within the capsule. So go watch the movie. It was definitely an interesting movie, but that got my mind to thinking. So if you're sitting in the place where you just don't know, do we have commodity, standard, or custom? Start asking some of these questions. Can we continue to perform this if the leader leaves or if a couple of the technical experts decide to move along? And is this something that our clients are going to continue to want us to deliver, even if that person or people are not with us? So again, there's that relationship capital and so forth. Taking you back to the processes session that we did. And if you didn't see that session, no worries. This is really an image of the general systems theory, not my creation. You can Google it, go to Google Scholar and pull it up. But essentially, through our organization, we will put things in, it'll be processed or produced, and then we'll send it out the door to our clients or customers, right? And so as we give thought to that, and we think about what we are trying to deliver to our clients, the products and or services, then what are those specific job families that we need within our organization to make it happen? So what are those groups or teams that will efficiently, smoothly, and successfully perform the core services, products, or function that we set out to provide, right? And so there's three main areas that you should give thought to. One is that input, the sales and business development. Do we have the right team that can help us drive in business to our organization, whether it's a service or product? Are there people that are demanding what we are providing, and how can they bring more, especially if we want to grow our organization? And then as you think about production and operations, think about how that area needs to be organized in order to smoothly do what you need them to do, right? As you think about process and think about flow chart, you'll see one on the next slide. What are those key areas or functions that are required? And this is going to vary based upon the type of organization, but some that jump out specifically are technical. Who are those people with the technical knowledge, experience, or expertise that are needed to be able to produce the commodity that we provide and or some of those services we talked about on the other slides? Project management, is that going to be part of somebody's role? Is it going to be a separate function where it is a specific individual and that's all they do day in and day out? Very similar to business development. Sometimes you have standalone people. So if I'm selling widgets, that makes sense. I'm going to have a salesperson who's making commission. But when you're in a service organization, you might have some of your individuals that provide that custom expertise who are also out there cultivating the relationships and building business for the organization. So is that layered onto their role, or do you at this point, because you're growing, now have a need to have somebody focus solely on business development to ensure that you're winning as much work as you possibly can? And then as you look down here, support and admin, these are traditional no matter what type of organization you're in. The number of people that might be in these roles would vary based upon your firm size, depending how many employees you might have or the revenue that you have, etc. But I don't want this section to be given less importance, because as you think about the core of what they do, we want to make sure that they're not focusing their energy in ways that is working counterclockwise or pulling away from the core services and the things that we need to do. So how can they best support? What are those tasks? What are those things? What's the service that they need to provide to their internal customer of the people that are delivering your product or service? And do we have it defined in a way that they know what is the best use of their time? And how can we leverage technology through all of that to be the best support for the team that actually is producing or part of the operations group? So here is a repeat slide from the processes. Just wanted to connect it to this conversation because as you think about, you have a request for your product or service, and then you have potentially tasks that are performed, you have processes that are followed, you have decisions that need to be made along the way, and making sure that your job families and your structure is pulled together in a way that it's clear who has that decision-making authority, rather than being siloed because we don't understand each other's services or products. But how can we make sure that we're being consistent with some of those decisions, approaching them in a standard way, not saying every decision is going to have the same outcome because there's definitely variables in there, but essentially we want to make sure that the experience that our clients and our employees have feels and looks the same, right? That it's not just all these pieces connected together like a puzzle and then you have no idea what the picture on the puzzle is supposed to look like, but rather how can we make sure that that flow is seamless and make sure that the experience is very similar, because if it's not, it'll feel disjointed, and again, that won't be as successful as you desire it to be. We're going to spend a couple minutes here talking about business life cycle. We are getting near the end of our time here, and certainly I am saving some time for question and answers at the end here. But essentially, as you think about the structure of your organization, it's definitely going to look different based upon where you are at in the life cycle of your organization. Based upon how all of you responded, many of you are in that growth mode. And whether it's because it's organic, or maybe you acquired an organization recently, or you have new products and services that you are looking to take to market or recently took to market. And so the structure of that might be different than some of your more mature lines that you have. So when you're in the new and growing, a lot of times that's based on expertise. Somebody has an idea and it's specialized, and you have a couple companies that want this service or product, and so you pursue that, and now you find, hey, there's actually more people that could benefit from this type of service, which aligns with our purpose and the values and the return on investment that we're looking to achieve. But essentially, as you move towards a more mature type of organization, you'll find that it is commodity-based, procedural-based, may not be reinventing itself much, and that's not a bad thing. I mean, there's plenty of companies out there like McDonald's, right? A mature organization that does it very well. Occasionally, it'll put a new item on the menu. I think they're bringing back something from years ago. I just saw that advertised, but there's nothing wrong with that. We just have to understand what is it that we are going to look to do going forward as we think about our core services and products. Are we going to be introducing new things? Do we have to stay at the forefront of innovation and the market and providing those new and entrepreneurial ideas and products and so forth, or not? Or are we going to kind of stay a step behind, let other people take that risk, and we're just going to continue to be that stable provider that uses our experience to provide something that is consistent and of high quality and so forth? And the challenge is, for some of you that have large organizations, you might have a couple different examples in your organization where one area is more new and entrepreneurial and another might be more mature. So that definitely can impact the structure that you'll need to be able to successfully deliver in each of those areas as one organization. So I am curious, let's do my third poll question here to see what stage is your business in? Tell me. And if you have multiple, then just pick the one where it's most or a majority of your organization. Seems like we have a lot of mature organizations on here, and that's good. I would worry though sometimes, what would be the energy that you need to continue to be like a McDonald's or organizations like Ford and Chevy and those that have been around for decades or hundreds of years. How do you continue to keep the momentum and have your clients continue to demand your product or service without a disruptor coming down the road and potentially taking that market away from you? So Kaylee, whenever you're ready, we can go ahead and share that out. We don't have anybody who's in the new or entrepreneurial attending today, but we do have a lot who are developing, which is great. And then we have a majority of you in the mature, and none of these are bad answers. It's just interesting. I don't think I would have guessed that, but that's exciting. Thank you. Couple key questions that I would encourage you to take back to your team is to just think about, are the functional areas defined in the organization that are needed to achieve the purpose and strategy that we set out to do? And if not, well, then structure is exactly the right place that you need to think about that. And do you have resources allocated appropriately? Resources could be people, it could be technology, it could be equipment. What are those things that you need to be able to deliver your products and services? And then think about your knowledge within your organization. That's a huge asset. Unfortunately, not something we can quantify other than if we connect it to compensation and benefits, because the knowledge is with your people, right? But as you think about where you want to go, what do you want to pursue? Do you have the level of knowledge, either the experience or the expertise, to take you there? And if not, now you have to figure out, how are we going to get there? Is it going to be hiring 1 or 2 people? Is it training and developing our current staff? And or would you need to consider maybe an acquisition to be able to fill that gap? Because if you don't have that right knowledge for whether you want to provide a commodity, a standard product or service, or something more customized, if you don't have that knowledge, then you're not going to be able to be as successful as you would hope or desire to be. So just a couple things. Certainly, if there's any questions that any of you have thought of along the way that I haven't shared that you think would be helpful, please do put those in that question and answer area there. And so coming up next tomorrow at 2:00 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, we have a very unique presentation in the form of Daniel Burris will be joining us, and we're really excited about it. He is at the forefront of trends and how to really look at the future view of your organization. So if you like what I heard, or if you liked what you heard on one of the original slides I had today, or in any of the other presentations that I had done, I really encourage you to sign up. We have nearly 500 people joining us tomorrow, and we definitely can handle a lot more. So please consider joining us. If you can't, definitely register, because then you can go ahead and watch it afterward. It's one you don't want to miss, especially if you want to know how to stay on the front side of disruption and avoid losing any competitive advantage that you have in the marketplace. This is the session. So if you are interested in assessing where your organization is currently at, maybe you don't know, or you're unsure, or you're just curious, let me know. Limited time offer. We are providing a complimentary initial assessment, which will allow you to get a pulse on where you are currently at, where your leadership team thinks you're currently at, and you can choose who participates in that. It's not just a one user. I'd be interested to talk about who those people are that you think would contribute in a positive way to the assessment. And then we would have a 1-hour debrief based upon the results, and we would share insights with you as to where we think maybe there's some places you should focus a little bit on, especially as you're thinking about 2023. We're almost here at Q4, and how exciting to be at the time when you're getting ready for budget, thinking about where you're going to invest your time and energy. This definitely would be a great exercise to do here in the next month or so. So with that, I am going to see if we have any questions out there. Kaylee, anything that has come in?
We have nothing yet.
Okay.
So now's the time to get your questions in. We do have a few moments here, so we'll give you a few. Christy, any final remarks while we're waiting?
No, I just want to thank each and every one of you for joining us today. Definitely participate in the survey. I heard your feedback loud and clear on the past couple, and definitely try to adjust and shift so that way this continues to be a meaningful place for you to get your information and insights, and that you can learn from our experiences, not only from me, but everybody here at Stambonas. So thank you, everybody. I really appreciate you joining me today.
And I don't see any questions coming in, so I'll go ahead and close the session. But if you do have a question that does pop up after we do end, please put that into the survey and Christy will get that feedback as well.